So that's recording. And welcome, Denise. I want to thank you for sharing the article with me, and letting us, well, basically starting the ball rolling on facilitating this. So let's start off with. I mean, we're a couple minutes early, but I imagine that if anyone else wants to come in, they'll come in as we are kind of gathering. So let's start off with a word of prayer, and then just I have a couple of notes that I've made, just kind of discussion questions to get us started, and let's see where this all goes. All right, but let's come together with prayer first. Almighty and merciful God, we thank you for the opportunity to be together in fellowship and community with you and with each other, even in these strange video chat times, with computers that sometimes do strange things. But we thank you, God, for this chance to be together with one another, even in this way. Be in our discussion today. Help us to come to a more clear understanding of your word and your work in our lives, and how we can be your hands and feet and voice for our fellow humans. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right.
It's 12 hours.
Oh, okay. Apparently it's 12 o'clock.
There must be a way to turn that off, and we've never figured it out. So
Well, honestly, it's a good timestamp. It tells us that we're starting on time, and I figured that we would go no more than an hour, and if our discussion seems to wind up, before that time, then we'll close when it seems appropriate. But I figured about an hour would be our discussion. So. Anyway, I guess I'll start off by asking, have you all had a chance to read the article that Denise shared?
yes.
Yes, it was very interesting. I thought, at least. So one of the first questions that I then wanted to ask was what do you feel when you hear the word Christian? And this can be two different ways of asking. This can be, what do you want to feel, and what do you actually feel? Anyone want to share?
Well, I always think of a Christian as following Christ.
Mm-hmm. Right. Follow Christ.
And follow Christ's teachings, which to me is actually really quite basic.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I always think of.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty, yeah, that's definitely one of the first things that comes to mind. And the word Christianity has been used a lot recently in different in ways that for me, at least, sometimes when I hear Christian being used as a, well, all the Christians vote in this way, or all Christians think this, and I want to protest, but I don't necessarily agree to that same thing, but I'm still Christian. And then there's that question of, well, how do we define Christianity? And so I wanted to start with asking, what do you feel? Because so often, at least for me, so often I go immediately to that logical, that thought process. And one of someone that I've been working with for some spiritual direction and guidance, she has been reflecting back to me that I need to step back and actually first identify, what am I feeling? And so for me, at least, sometimes when I hear the word Christianity, there's the, I want to feel as if, as that follower of Christ, but so often I feel betrayed. And so then there's that question of, well, why do I feel betrayed, and what is going on here? So that's why I wanted to start with that question to you. And Susan is here, so we'll wait
Yeah,
for.
I mean, I would say I agree with Diane, right? I mean, it's always been about this kind of this journey we're on, right? Like our Christian, our faith is really, it's always evolving, I think, as we grow and we have different understandings, but still the mystery. So where, for me, what I've been really struggling with the past 4 years, for sure, and I would say the last year, and probably like the last 3 months, has been this, I think, public definition of what Christianity identifies and what I feel my Christian beliefs are. And it's interesting to me, and one of the things that why this article, and actually others that I've really kind of been searching out and reading, is this, you know, this struggle. And I have to say, just before the election, I had a crisis, a faith crisis, when I'm kind of looking at my feed on social media, and I'm looking at the news, and I'm looking at all these people who are, you know, supposed to be leaders in our church, leaders in Christianity, and you know, they're touting this ideology as Christ, as Christ-like, and it's so revolting and different, and you know, and it's just like, and I really was praying, and I'll be completely honest, like just up to the election, I was praying, am I wrong? It was my beliefs of, you know, of tolerance and acceptance and love and equality and justice. Am I wrong? Because, you know, John MacArthur is in California, you know, opening up his church and it's making news, and Donald Trump is calling him saying like, how great, you know, you're defying COVID because this is your faith. And you know, I'm at a crisis. So
But isn't that where the problem is this faith and politics?
right.
It's because they've gotten so that if you're Christian, you're a patriot,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Right.
I certainly know a lot of people that aren't religious at all, but are patriots or whatever you want to call them. And, you know, you have to deal, and as a minister, you deal with social issues all the time in your sermons. And there again, you have to separate, is this a political issue or is this a social issue that we're, and I think that's what's gotten completely out of whack.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually had some feedback in the past, you know, when I was trying to make a sermon about a social issue.
Yeah.
I have actually experienced that feedback of people telling me that I'm doing political sermons. And so that, you know, Denise, I feel your faith crisis. I have certainly, you know, getting some of that feedback, I've had to go back and, you know, talk with colleagues and say, you know, was I wrong? And I've actually had some of my colleagues, you know, go through my sermons and give me the feedback of, you know, social versus political. And I'm sorry, I didn't silence my phone. I apologize. That was not very professional of me. It is now silenced. And certainly, you know, the colleagues that I spoke with, both within, you know, the local Presbyterians, and then also some of a more ecumenical bent, have actually given me the feedback that I needed to go farther, that I didn't, you know, speak on social issues enough. But I have to temper that with, you know, how am I being heard? So Susan, glad that you made it in. We started off after a brief prayer. I asked people the question, there it is. What do you feel when you hear the word Christian, and I divided that out into what do you want to feel and what do you actually feel. So that's what we've been talking about. That is what prompted the discussion that you were able to come in on. So welcome.
Thank you.
I've been watching Arlene's face. You've been very contemplative. Do you have anything that you want to jump in with and share?
Well, I don't think I have as much of a problem with the use of the word Christian. I mean, I totally agree with what Diane said. A Christian is one who follows Christ. One of my hangups has been people, the way the word evangelism is used and evangelistic. I mean, evangelism is spreading the good news about Jesus, and instead it's become this horrible, to me, horrible umbrella for a whole lot of kind of strange thinking. I have a lifelong friend who attends a small church over in Carlisle where everything is literal, and when she and another friend of mine get together, we're just kind of blown away by some of her views because she just accepts everything that comes from the pulpit. And they've been talking about the end times, and she's hopeful that all this turmoil is leading to the end times, and it really gets kind of wacky, really does.
That's exactly right. Yeah, sorry,
And
go
I
ahead.
have respect for her faith, and I don't doubt that she's a Christian, but that whole, what Denise and what the article was talking about, it's gotten so warped.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps the media is partially responsible, the way it's reported. I don't know. I mean, it was a very interesting article. I read it 3 times just to see if I had missed something, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up the word evangelism and evangelical, Arlene, because I had grew up sharing that association of, not the good one of this is spreading the good news, but of I could never be an evangelist. That was how I grew up, and it wasn't until I got to seminary and took some Greek classes when I was like, this word should be something that we as Christians should be claiming.
Right.
Why did we put this in the dustbin of words that we won't use? So yes, thank you, Arlene, for lifting up that word too, because that was another one that I kind of had in my mental list of words that I would like to bring up during this hour. So yeah.
But once again, that word has seemed to be taken over by politics.
Yes.
Right.
You tend to associate evangelical Christians
Right.
with a very, certain political view.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
You also think of evangelical churches as being mega churches
Yes.
and carry with them all of those evangelicals that we tend to lump into the same big pile, and whether that's good or bad, I'm not sure, but the whole thing of naming something evangelical automatically turns my brain off.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it shouldn't. You should not. But that's how it's evolved over the years.
You think of a fanatic when you think of evangelical, right? And that's
unfortunately,
and you shouldn't, right? We shouldn't.
Right. We
Yeah.
should all be claiming,
Right.
both the word Christian and the word evangelical as, we are people who spread this social witness that Christ, taught us.
Mhm.
We are followers of Christ by being Christians, and the good news is that, that we are in this together, that Christ wants us to lift up one another, that we can all, live our best selves and best lives by caring for one another. And yeah, it's
And I think, Evangelical scares people because they think they have to be out there preaching to people. And I always think of just, it's your acts, it's what you do. And maybe someone looks at you and says, wow, you know, they are living that life. Because no, not everyone is meant to go out there on the corner and stir up people. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I do want to get to look at some of the things directly in the article, but before we do, I actually think that I want to read a couple of gospel verses. So last Sunday, I alluded to the gospel reading from Mark, but I didn't actually delve in depth into it. But I want to lift out a couple of those verses, and then also a couple of verses from this upcoming Sunday. So this is Mark chapter 1, verses 23 through 26, and also same chapter, verses 32 through 34. 23 is, just then there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent and come out of him." And the unclean spirit, convulsing him, crying out with a loud voice, came out of him. And then the other one is starting at verse 32. That evening at sunset, the disciples brought to Jesus all who were sick or possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered around the door, and Jesus cured many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons, and he would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. And I've always found it very interesting that that these demons who were naming Christ the Son of God or the Messiah, Jesus, doesn't allow these demons to actually speak. And I've been thinking about it. Well, why might he have taken that approach? And one of the things that I was thinking about, and I would love to hear some of your thoughts, is that demons mix lies with truth. And it's difficult to actually separate the truth from the lies that the demons would use. So they would use part of the truth to then spread a lie. And how does that idea of using truth to spread a lie, how does that weave its way through the politics, some of the associations with the words of Christianity and evangelicalism, etc., and also Christian nationalism, which is, I think, Diane, what you mentioned with these patriots who, I was in tears on January 6th to see Christian symbols being part of that terrible attack. I had a very hard time on that day. So I would love to hear some of your thoughts.
And even kind of going back, I remember that during the BLM protests, when the National Guard had gassed everyone as outside in front of the White House for the photo op of our then president to walk down the road and stand there. And actually the word that came to mind was blasphemy.
Yeah. Yes.
How blasphemous is this, that you're using those Christian symbols for something that to me is so unchristian.
Yeah. And that ties back to, how do you recognize the gospel of Christ? You know, you look at, where is the tolerance and the acceptance and the love and the equality and the justice, and if what you are seeing is not that, then it's not the gospel.
How do you discern truth from lies
Yeah.
when they're coming from the same source? It's very hard. And again, I think you have to go back to the actions of Christ. How did Christ discern what was a demon, what
Yeah.
was not? It's hard in this day and age.
Yeah.
Because the same mouth that says truth also says lies.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's because the person speaking has been misled by someone else.
Mhm.
And it is difficult to know just where, how do those lies get mixed in. But yeah, I've often found it very interesting that Christ does have a bit of an advantage when it comes to identifying who the demons are. Let's just put it out that way. And so our job is a little bit more difficult at identifying the demons. So how? What do you do?
Well, I think one of the problems, certainly in this day and age, is social media and cable, because you can go to just your opinion. I mean, I'm dating myself, but of course, when I was young, there were, 3 major networks and it was just news. Now, I mean, let's face it, you can go to Fox and hear them,
Yeah.
or you can go to MSNBC and hear them.
Yeah.
And social media is really bad, because that, I think, can really bring people in. And if you're not, I mean, I drive Richard a little crazy, because I do watch MSNBC and Fox is right next door, and I click to Fox to see what they're doing. I mean, so often to me, they're lying.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah.
And like you said, there may be a little bit of truth in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I have friends who will just say, well, I saw this in the paper or whatever, so it has to be true. And you're kind of like, not necessarily. So I think you have to go to some real other sources, that are not one. I mean, you could spend your whole day doing this. Don't get me wrong. I get on the computer in the morning with different feeds, and it's like, oh my goodness, I've been here for an hour already. But
And did I learn anything?
it just gives you those different views. But some people just want to hear one thing, and
Their
That's
echo
what they're
chamber.
that's what they're going to go to.
People
Yeah.
want to live in an echo chamber. And I have to say, one of the things, just for information, so kind of, not biblical, but one of the things that, like, I instruct my kids, one of the conversations that we have, and even my husband sometimes, about media sources or sources of information just in general. And one of the things I can say, and I am somebody who consumes a lot of news, and it's my anxiety, it's just and to a point where it is a fault. Like, I need to know. But one of the things I've learned, and I was somebody, I really do seek out other opinions, because I'm afraid, I don't want to live in an echo chamber. And believe me, nobody is more doubtful of my opinion than me. And that's the truth. So, and I'm always questioning, like, why do I think this? Where is the bias? What was the root of this that I have formed this opinion? But one of the things I have learned from somebody who really does consume a lot of media, and not really even TV media as much as I do a lot of print and, reading and podcasts and that sort of thing, is what I have found what I found consistently across the board. You can have your right leaning, you can have your left leaning, and I don't mean to pick on Fox, but this has been my observation, is that I can read a story in 10 different sources, centered, NPR, left leaning, Mother Jones, you know, and the information will essentially be the same, right? Like the basic information, there will be commentary that you can tell the politics are there or where you lean. But what is not there, and what is there with Fox, is that Fox will tell you, you can only believe this, what we're saying. Everybody else is lying. Everybody else is lying. We are the only source. You're not going to get that from other news sources. They're not saying that. They're going to give you their story. They're even going to give you their bias to a degree, but you can point, you can extract that, but the facts are going to be there. And nobody, I get very weary if anybody tells you that you can only believe me and do not believe everybody else. One of my other things that I've been reading a lot about is cults and cult behavior. And, you know, yes, probably because of the sign of the times and the things that we're going through. And that is actually ground rule number one for cult behavior. And I'm not saying that if you like, you know, if you watch Fox, that you're part of a cult, but it is a manipulation tactic for control. And it's obvious there. And I am somebody who did watch Fox. I don't watch Fox anymore. I can't even put it on anymore for the 5 minutes just to kind of say, okay, what are they saying about this? I can't even do that anymore.
Well,
I had a friend on Facebook who asked me, because of my political postings, if I ever watched any news but in MSNBC. And I said, yeah, I watch MSNBC and CNN and PBS. I don't watch Fox. And I said, do you ever watch anything but Fox? And he said, no, he never did.
yeah.
And because of his political postings and rants, I unfriended him.
Yeah.
I just didn't, I don't want to be subjected to that kind of critique.
I think we have to separate too, Fox as a news channel. They may have news. We're
Yeah.
talking about, I think, the pundits at night,
Right.
who they're just totally giving their opinion. I even question their opinion. Is this just for ratings? Is this just well, some of them have come from other stations
Mhm.
and then they've changed, you know. So we are talking about the pundits at night. I don't turn Fox on in the day as far as news goes. So I don't know if they have regular news broadcast and that it's just the news, but certainly the pundits at night are
They
interesting.
do have
Do they?
regular news. And I have to say, so the last time I was kind of, you know, really trying to balance my views and watching, and I don't really watch a lot of news, only if there's something going on. And I want to, you know, if there's a visual that needs to be had. For the most part, I'm either listening to the, you know, the radio or I'm reading. But for when after the Floyd protest,
Yes.
I was watching the news. I was watching all the channels, and there was a very clear distinction between how Fox was presenting this versus MSNBC and CNN, you know, and you know that it was going to be, but I have to say that the narrative was so different that I got to a point where I said to my husband, like, okay, stop, you can't change. Like, if you find another channel like to switch between, but stop putting this on, because, and just even what they were choosing to show in terms of, you know, it was so curated to a certain perspective.
And that actually, when I was reading the article, one of the kind of reading between the lines things that I was doing as I was reading this article was, you know, how did this individual come to his beliefs? You know, he had a long life of being raised in the Evangelical church, you know, long example of I can't think of the exact paragraph. Right. He grew up in the Baptist church, was constantly in Sunday school. His dad ran ministries that served the hungry and the homeless. And so it's very much part of this serving idea. And then it says, politics was a natural part of this world.
Mm.
And I just thought, okay, so that's very interesting, because, you know, here we've been talking about the line between social issues and politics, and making certain that that when we're talking about social issues, we're grounding them in our faith and showing that they are social issues and that they're not political, because, you know, we need to be helping people, and it's part of our faith to help people. And if politics on either side, or better would be joint, you know, want to create policies and procedures that also help people, then that's something that we in our faith can help support and keep a watchful eye on, to make certain that the people who are the most vulnerable are getting the help that they need. And that for me has been my view on politics. Is I, as a faithful person interested in social issues, need to keep an eye on what is happening politically, so that I can advocate for those who are still the most vulnerable, no matter what happens politically. And so I just found it very interesting that that for I'm going to murder his name because I'm very bad at phonics. Kinsinger.
Yeah.
Okay. I found it very interesting that for him, politics was a natural part of the world, the faith world that he grew up in. So, and we've been talking about that, you know, our discussion about faith and definitions of Christianity and evangelicalism. We so quickly had to address the politics and the Christian nationalism. And I mean, Christian nationalism, it's not something new. I mean, even in Jesus' time, they were dealing with empire. Even in Moses' time, they were dealing with the difficulties of empire, and how does empire affect people of faith. And so this is just our cross at this time, is how do we handle this? So more thoughts?
One of the things, our son-in-law's sister belongs to a mega church, I guess in Pennsylvania or something. But he has described her, and it isn't because he doesn't love her or anything like that, but he just said, she is a one-issue voter. She is well, and I don't even like the expression pro-life, because the same people who are opposed to abortion may be perfectly happy murdering, you know, people in another country or whatever.
Right.
But that is her whole thing. And I imagine I don't know a lot of people like that, but I would imagine there are quite a few who have chosen one issue, and then everything else comes along with it, because that's where they're coming from. And I don't know, I just kind of threw that out there as an observation.
And then they do make that a Christian issue then.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then everything else goes along with it, that they may not have any interest in, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
When pro-life ends at birth, is it really pro-life?
Well, yeah, don't get me.
You know, I mean, let's say just what we saw, right, in the final days of this administration with those federal executions. I mean, how many people were? I was in tears, honestly, just to witness that, the hypocrisy, like.
One of the things that his article brings up when he is talking about growing up with the politics, I would equate that with evangelism. His politics and then growing up with those politics were actually evangelical acts, as far as working, feeding people, clothing people, sheltering people. He may call that political, but I call it evangelical.
Right. because and that ties back to what we were saying, is that for us those are social issues.
Mhm.
And so why is it being listed as political here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different definition of political.
I guess. And so again, where does that, how do we feel when we see that something that we think is a social issue is being also defined as a political issue? What does that make us feel like?
Yeah. Yep.
And how do you reconcile? I mean, I really like that Arlene brought that up, but like, how do you reconcile these, right, these one position voters who now represent all Christians, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, exactly, because, you're right, your vote is just on this, that's it, right? That's that one issue. And
Hmm.
I mean, and no one's willing to kind of have those difficult conversations too about these issues that, I don't think anybody is, let's say, pro-abortion.
Right.
Nobody is pro-abortion, but why as a church can we not have conversations on how can we eliminate the need
Right.
for something like abortion, just to use that as an example. But those conversations don't happen, that's in the Christian church. They don't happen.
Mm-hmm. I'll have to look to see if there's some books in like the PCUSA store or some other ecumenical stores around it, so that we can have some future conversations about that. I think. Because I think that I have seen some books, but again, thought versus feeling. Sometimes some of these books that are published are very, very, using a lot of critical thinking, which is good. We should be using
Right.
critical thinking, but we tend to skip over how are we feeling about this issue before just hopping into let's think about it. So,
well, and especially if we're talking about, especially the national conversation now is unity, right? Like we all need to unite, and
right.
But if you're not going to kind of have these tough conversations, and politically, right, the Catholic Church, I do believe, took a stance against Biden, even though he's a practicing
Right.
Catholic, because
Right.
of his support on policies that are pro-choice. So yeah, I don't know. This is the kind of the stall, right? This is where we get to the stall of where now all of a sudden we're kind of, we don't belong, right? We're the Christians that don't belong to the national Christian, evangelical group that are, like Arlene pointed out, it's the, one issue voters.
Well, one of the quotes he had in here was really interesting. He said, there are many people that have made America their God, that have made the economy their God, and that have made Donald Trump their God, and that have made their political identity their God. And that kind of puts it in a nutshell,
Yeah.
a little bit. And like Denise said, we're those outsiders at this point, we're kind of just trying to be Christians and do what Jesus would do. And, it's like, no, you got to do more than that.
So speak to that more. What is there something more that we can do in counter to what was lifted out in that paragraph that you quoted? And again, how do we feel about this?
Yeah.
Do we need to do something that's contra
Mm-hmm.
rather than doing what we continue doing in our own faith that we think we're doing correctly, as Jesus would do? I'm not sure we have to actually do a contra. Maybe we do.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's hard right now is because of COVID, we're not together.
Yeah.
We don't have our coffee hours where we talk and maybe come up with ideas of things we could do, as our congregation for other people and things like that. So I think we've missed out because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I always think of doing for other people.
Yep.
That to me is the best way, I think, to show Christianity is taking care of people, I guess, is what I'm thinking of. But that's been so hard this year.
Our church in California had a program which was participating in a feeding program for inner city people in Los Angeles. And I think there were other churches, excuse me, involved, but the program was called Let's Eat First and Then We'll Talk, which kind of says it all. You can't, I mean, to spread an evangelical message when someone's hungry or needy in some other way, sort of like saying, I'll pray for you. And, you know, it's,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
The hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's do some creative thinking then. What are some needs that that are coming up? Some things that we could actually do over the phone to help people. I have one in mind, but I want to see what you guys think of first, and then I'll mention the one that I have in mind.
Well, I've been just thinking in terms of, because we're looking at the manse, what to do with the manse. I mean, it would be wonderful if some sort of nonprofit could use it in some way and possibly just, you know, pay us enough to cover expenses or something like that. It's a beautiful house. And I know it's a huge issue with the congregation, which I totally understand. But it would be lovely to use it in some way to help someone out. I just don't know how.
I've heard, you know, certainly at session meetings, very similar to what you've just said, Diane, and a lot of it stems from Richard's work with
Joshua Project.
yes, with the Joshua Project. That
Yeah.
that idea has been bandied out quite a bit as a possibility. So yes, thinking creatively about how to get the manse in a state that can be used by a nonprofit to help people. Yeah.
I think too, if you are able and have the time to become part of an organization like Joshua Project to help with that. Also volunteer at our own food pantry if they are still in need of
always
volunteers. Yeah.
And you know, just kind of going even a little bit basic, maybe, you know, an education approach and a Christian education approach, like good old Bible study. Maybe we need to start reading and discussing the Bible and the verses. That's what I try to do when I'm struggling with something, especially something spiritual, or even some of the difficulty we've had in our own church this past year, some of the conflict. And my tool really has been going back to, you know, and Paul has actually been, read Paul, right? But for me, just to kind of ground my thoughts and my position, and maybe that's what we need more of, like in terms of a reawakening, like, and also having that discussion with it. You know, because it's easy, and it was really kind of heartbreaking this past year to see some of our members leave because of, you know, of things that really were very Christian and social justice related, but they took very personal and so kind of how can we help people to, you know, remove that personal identity piece to these issues, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, but you know, ground what we're doing and what we're saying and what we're believing in the scripture.
You know, that's exactly, so one of the things that I've been participating in recently, it's called the Clergy Emergency League, and it's an ecumenical group of clergy that has been trying to figure out how to actually address some of the things that have been going on the national stage in terms of Christian nationalism, how to address it in our sermons, etc. And Denise, that's exactly, making certain that our sermons are grounded in biblical concepts. That is something that's been reinforced, and the league has said a couple of times actually that if you can get the message across without mentioning current events, but
Yeah.
really ground it in the biblical concepts with clearly enough analogies that people can draw conclusions, but really back to basics. Now, Arlene, you before COVID, you participated in the Sunday morning Bible study, and so did you, Susan.
Yeah.
And I had mentioned a couple weeks ago during I think it was the announcements of starting up a Bible study. It's a matter of finding a good time, because it's like, every Tuesday is good except for the first Tuesday of the month, but and then every Wednesday except for the third Wednesday. And so I wouldn't want to be bouncing things around. I would want a consistent time. And similar to this, a small group, we record the session and then people can watch it afterwards. That's one of the things that I was thinking of.
I'd love to see it. I have really missed, excuse me, Bible studies. I went to one in California that was very fundamentalist and evangelical, but I learned from it, and I learned kind of to define my own faith and where it went. We had a women's Bible study in Massachusetts for many, many, many years. And we have had the Sunday morning thing. I kind of feel we were getting a little off track with this, the last, which was a series of lectures that mostly questioned Jesus' identity. And I really believe that our best effort would be in a true Bible study where we just say, okay, we're going to read the book of Mark, or we're going to
I agree with you, Arlene.
whatever, and really study each. I knew of one Bible study where they would spend a whole week or a whole month on one verse. I don't mean to be that picky or whatever you want to call it, but I do think that a good solid Bible study would be wonderful.
All right. Well,
And there was one, because we have a whole set of those books. You know, Susan, I was
do.
teaching Sunday school at the time and I couldn't do it because it was Sunday morning, but there's a whole series of Bible study guides in the church library that
Yep.
of each book of the Bible.
Yep.
And Arlene, I agree with you that we were definitely getting off track. I felt like this is not so scriptural related.
Right. So one of the, back to my original question about what are some of the things that we can do, while our main form of communicating with others is either over the computer or over the phones. One of the things that that has come up in a couple different pastor groups is the possibility of finding ways to help sign people up to get vaccines. Because that, you need a certain amount of information, yes, but there's so many people who have a hard time navigating through the computer system. I mean, even people who know computers are having a hard time with some of the current setup. But would that be a way, setting up a couple of people to just kind of have basically office hours to help people over the phone navigate through that computer system. And I know that a lot of the issue right now has to deal with supplies. And I mean, Denise, you can probably tell everyone better than I can, but the way what I've heard is that, it's not just amount of vaccine, but it is supplies, it is space, it is, people, it's all kinds of different things. And access to computers and the skills to use the system is one of the stumbling blocks as well. And so perhaps a way right now to help people might be to just have people who have navigated the process successfully be willing, on whatever limited basis, to say, I have done this, let me help you. So that's one of the things that I was thinking about.
I think one of the issues with that might be confidentiality.
Yes.
I don't know. Denise, you probably know more than I about the accessibility of doing these online appointments. Dick and I have appointments on 2 separate days, late March at SUNY Albany. Those were the soonest we could get. And then I tried to get appointments last Friday.
Mm,
Friday? Yeah. And the appointments were gone in 2 minutes.
right.
So you have to have a very fast bandwidth. You have to be able to get in quickly. I was on 2 devices trying to get through and could not. So again, I don't know about confidentiality issues. Maybe we wouldn't need to know anything confidential from people to help them.
I don't think there's really a confidentiality issue for a community. I mean, a community effort like this, although we would need to look into that a little bit further. Really, the only real issue where confidentiality comes in is for licensed professionals.
Okay.
So, because we're engaged in a healthcare relationship. So if your neighbor went to you and said, Susan, I need your help, that you wouldn't be bound to any confidentiality issues. Obviously, we would.
I got you.
Respectful in people's privacy and not be selling it but I mean, I think there's some things to kind of think about, though. You're right, as a church doing this, and I'm sure we can probably find some examples out there, because I'm sure other this does seem to be the priority kind of grassroots effort right now, because of all the things that you did state are absolutely true. There is a huge a huge divide between people who have computer literacy skills and people who don't, even just down to just having access. You're right. So I think would be a great option, for a community, a community assistance program to do. But you're right, there's just so many barriers right now. Availability of appointments and availability of supply. It really comes down to supply. That's what it comes down to. Now, there was news yesterday that this current administration is sending 1 million doses to pharmacies across the nation. And so now we're kind of opening that pathway, which is, really reassuring, because most communities do have pharmacies. So that's another, another way. Yeah, it's a huge, there's so many barriers right now, but I'm confident that at least we have people who are working on these and working to kind of, but it changes every day.
Oh, absolutely.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if there were just so many vaccines out there that we could offer to open the Christian Ed building to do vaccines?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yeah. Mobile vaccine units. That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking back at the beginning of all of this, and when I knew that they were working on vaccines, was I thought, well, we do the flu clinic,
Right.
why wouldn't it be great to also have a COVID clinic at the church campus? That would be in keeping with the flu clinic that we do, et cetera. And then I saw the list of requirements for vaccine site because New York State Council of Churches also had that idea of, why not use houses of faith? And You had to have separated bathrooms, so that staff could be in one and anyone coming, a different bathroom. You had to have a flow through the room and nothing else being used in the building at the time or something. There's a long list of various requirements.
And freezers.
Right, freezers.
Yeah, freezers, the storage is the issue.
Yes.
But that's not going to be an issue with, I believe, the Johnson & Johnson and the AstraZeneca one. So, those are slated to get next in terms of emergency authorization use. So,
Right.
We'll see.
And then, then the other question is, as we are looking at some of these ways of helping, whether it's through the manse, whether it's through a Bible study, whether it's through helping to facilitate, getting people, vaccine, how can we do that in such a way that, that we are reclaiming some of these words that we've spoken about, whether it is Christianity or evangelical or, whatever, or even social issues, because so often, that is rife with strain. How do we use what we're doing to show this is who we are? We're not the Christians that don't belong. We are Christians.
Yeah.
And two things that we do and we do well are the after-school program
Yes.
and the summer camp. And
Yeah.
please pray that we can have live summer camp this year. Oh my
yes.
goodness. I don't know if, we've talked about trying to be prepared for both possibilities, but I can't. Last year was not very successful with online for a whole bunch of reasons. So
Yeah.
they did the best they could, but
I'm hopeful. I'm
Yeah.
hopeful, Arlene. That's
I
been
am too. I am
I
too.
am too, because really the big push now is really getting schools open. That's a top priority. So if we can get schools open, I think it's summer camp's gonna slide right in there. So
But we have so many children who would never have heard the gospel message if it were not for camp in particular, and they're also getting it at after school.
yeah.
So,
And that's what I was thinking before you actually brought that up, Arlene, is when we're like, how do we get the message out? Like, this is who we are. It's, the message really isn't for us, right? Like the message is for all these people who have this idea that this is what Christianity is.
Mhm.
And either they're, my hope is I can be, they're either not interested in it. So that's a group of people maybe we can bring in, but more so like people who maybe are interested in that. Like I want them here. Like I want them to know this other, message.
And then there's also people who have been hurt by some of the examples of Christianity that we've spoken about that are not how we represent the gospel. There's a lot of people who've been deeply, deeply hurt by the Christian nationalism and those sorts of expressions. And so when we show who we are as Christians, we are providing that soothing balm, provided people can see it.
Right.
Well, we are coming up close to 1 o'clock, and I want to respect everyone's time. So does anyone have any closing thoughts that you want to share very quickly?
No, but thank you for hosting that.
Yeah, thank you for, and thank you, Denise, for the articles you send
Yeah.
me.
right.
They're always fascinating. And a lot of times the articles refer to other articles and then I go to those other articles. So yeah, thanks.
Good. I don't have a lot of people I can share these things with. So thank you for letting me share them with you. And actually there's, I don't know if you guys had saw it, but I'll try to email it. So the article talked about Franklin Graham.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know if you've seen, her name is Jerusalem, but it's Billy Graham's granddaughter.
Okay.
Who, if you've seen her kind
Yeah.
of what she's come out with. And yeah, so, or you can just Google Billy Graham's granddaughter, and she's done a couple op-eds and really kind of has expressed what our thoughts are. And she actually just recently did another kind of interview addressing Franklin Graham's comments in that article. So
Interesting.
yeah. So, but yeah, thank you for this, and it was definitely needed.
Well, I'd like to close this with prayer. I'm always willing to pray unless someone else would like to. All right. I guess that I guess I will. All right, let us pray. Merciful God, Holy Spirit, and our Savior Jesus Christ, we thank you for the opportunity to gather to say your name, to claim your gospel, to feel your teachings in our soul. We thank you for the opportunity to express our hurt, our frustrations, and our hopes. And we ask now, O God, that as we end this time of fellowship together, that we feel your inspiration deep within ourselves, and we take that energy out into your world to be with your people. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.